At Cancer Cures Now, our primary goal is to help patients to gear up and fight cancer by accessing the most recent drugs and treatments for cancer. On May 30th, 2018, almost 2 years after its original introduction, the Federal Right to Try Act was signed into law with the hope that the law would provide U.S. citizens with access to the many new drugs and treatments being developed. We'd like to share with you what we believe this law means for cancer patients now. But first, a quick overview. In order to be utilized, new cancer drugs and treatments must be approved by the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA approval process requires proof with testing on humans through clinical trials that they are safe and that they work. The clinical trial process can cost many millions of dollars and take many years. Before clinical trials begin, the birth of a new drug or therapy starts with research and development. Phase 1 of the trials focuses on human safety. Phases 2 and 3 focus on efficacy. Does it do what it's supposed to do, and how successfully? After completing these trials, the new drug or treatment is then approved by the FDA and made available to the public. Patient enrollment in clinical trials is very limited and very selective, so not many patients get access to these new drugs and therapies this way. For terminally ill patients, there's simply not enough time to wait. People were frustrated with this lack of access to new technologies, so state laws were passed allowing patients to access these new technologies while protecting participating doctors and drug companies. The rationale was simple. If someone was predicted to die from an illness or disease with current approved treatments, why shouldn't they have the right to try new, highly effective treatments that were going through the clinical trial approval process, even though they didn't qualify for the trial? In just the past few years, 40 states have passed right-to-try laws that are intended to allow qualifying patients to gain access to new drugs or treatments that could save their lives, without having to wait for the multi-year FDA approval process. Generally, these laws also provide immunity for participating doctors and drug companies. Unfortunately, while state right-to-try laws provide some liability protection for doctors and drug companies, without a federal right-to-try law, there were serious questions about civil and criminal consequences at the federal level. The new Right to Try Act is the federal government's response to the initiative started at the state level. So, there are now 3 ways to access new technology in the United States before the FDA approves the technology. The first is by participating in a clinical trial. The second is by using the new Right to Try laws. And the third is by using the FDA's Expanded Access Program. At Cancer Cures Now, after reviewing the new Federal Right to Try Act carefully, we found several troubling aspects in the language of the law. First, the section called No Liability actually provides very little liability protection and leaves manufacturers with nothing to gain and a lot to lose by offering their new cures to desperate patients. Not many providers will open themselves to potential civil suits for providing untried, incompletely tested investigational drugs. In fact, the word unless can be considered problematic for doctors as well. This benign phrasing deflates one of the main purposes of the law, which was to bring protection to doctors and drug providers as they enable patients to try new cures. We've also found another troubling phrase near the very beginning of the Right to Try Act, more weak language that may cause more problems for anyone seeking a cure. Fred Bergman is the founder of a clinical trial company, and he has also owned and operated several healthcare companies over the past 25 years. He is also the Chief Executive Officer of Cancer Cures Now.
I think that the exhaust and certify requirements will provide some serious hurdles for patients. I also don't like the idea of making patients endure 40, 50-year-old invasive or toxic treatments before they have a right to try new, less dangerous treatments, such as targeted therapies and immunotherapies. There are many of these new therapies going through clinical trials now, and they're designed to target only cancer cells, while chemotherapy and radiation therapy are known to kill healthy cells, along with cancer cells.
Requiring a physician to sign off on a certification that the patient has exhausted all approved treatment is, in my opinion, a little bit difficult without a definition of that exhausted word. So it seems to me that it needs to be amended and changed to define that word and give it some meaning And along the way, maybe FDA can help do that and get some better regulations on the table. And it will be much better package, I would say, for both the doctors, the drug companies, and the patient.
For children cancer victims, I believe this requirement to exhaust is cruel. That's because it's been proven that the killing of normal cells with chemotherapy and radiation therapy in a developing child causes a number of serious lifelong chronic conditions. In my opinion, from a patient advocate standpoint, the FDA standards for early access to new technologies are much more workable and humane.
This U.S. Government Accounting Office report from 2017 reveals that the FDA approved 99% of expanded access requests. But over a 3-year period, only 5,800 requests were made.
We experienced this problem in 2016 when we tried to get a very sweet, terminally ill woman with cancer to get into the FDA's expanded access program. We were trying to get her access to a truly revolutionary immunotherapy. We were close, but her doctor, even though he was all for it, was pulled back by his attorney. We looked for other doctors to work with her, but there just wasn't time. Barbara lost the race.
One important aspect added to the Right to Try Act is the no use of outcomes provision. In clinical trials, each patient's journey through the trial is documented at every step. Drug companies who have spent millions already on research and other costs in getting a treatment to trial want the best possible outcomes. This leaves those who are very ill or in a very weakened state outside of the model patients pattern that the trial is meant for in order to succeed. However, this very important no use of outcomes provision is worded so that the federal government agencies can override this provision at their discretion. This will create a hurdle for drug manufacturers in helping patients that don't qualify for their clinical trials. And if that provision is in fact overridden, then the results shall be made part of the administrative record, which brings the drug manufacturer potential negative publicity in addition to exposing them to legal and bureaucratic complications. We believe that few drug companies will line up to subject themselves to this process, and that's not good enough for patients in need. If the U.S. government really wants terminally ill children, adults, and seniors to access potentially life-saving new cures, there must be unambiguous and unqualified language protecting the drug manufacturers from overly regulated negative ramifications.
At Cancer Cures Now, one of our missions is to study laws like the Right to Try laws and get them to actually work for cancer patients.
To find out more about Right to Try, compassionate care, and clinical trials, and how we're helping cancer patients to gear up for the fight of their lives, go to cancercuresnow.org.